Hi, my name is Uta Nagel and I'm here today at the Pearson residence with James Tur, award-winning architect of the west coast of Canada. And we admired the house like for an hour before rolling, and today we would like to ask him what inspired him to design this house and what inspires you as an architect about architecture.
Great. Well, my inspiration really comes from the setting, the West Coast setting. And my background is landscape architecture as well as architecture, so I'm very interested in the site and in discovering the site, discovering what's unique about a site. I like to say every site tells a story, and part of the design exploration is really understanding the site and how to site the house within nature for the views and also for the sun, understanding how the wind travels through the site. So I get a lot of inspiration from that, and then I get a lot of inspiration out of having great clients. So, you know, a good client will definitely inspire an architect. And in this house here is definitely a product of a great relationship between a client and myself as the architect. So they travel all over the world. Richard is a professor of archaeology at UBC, and very, very interesting. And his wife Causeway is actually born in Kyoto, so she's a Japanese Canadian. So there's a big influence of the clients in this house as well.
It shows that it is a West Coast house with all these beautiful beams and all the wood that you brought in. So I wonder, what would you say is the most important thing about a house like this in terms of just all the different facets and the structure of it and the beams and the wood and the materials? What would you say is sort of like a really huge component for you to build a house like this? Is the material probably very important?
The materials are extremely important, obviously, particularly on the West Coast, where I want to explore the materials of the West Coast and use materials that are known to the West Coast and native to the West Coast. So as you look around, you'll see a lot of wood. That's Douglas fir, and I call it the miracle wood. It's a wood that grows in the West Coast of Canada and down to the States. It's readily available, and it's wonderful. It's a miracle for a couple of reasons. One, it's one of the strongest woods we have to use as a softwood, so it's very, very strong in terms of its bending strength, its tensile strength, its compressive strength. So it's very good for beams and for opening large spans, which is part of the architecture of the West Coast, is having these large openings. And then the other thing about Douglas fir, it has this beautiful patina to it. As it ages, it gets an orangey, warm glow to it. So it just gets better with age. It's like a fine wine. So this house was built about 8 years ago, and as you can see, it's really mellowing in its age. And then another material that's really important to me, which is also a material that's very common in West Coast architecture, is concrete, as we see in this house. And concrete is a very interesting material. One, because when you build with it, you actually build with wood. You build the forms first, and you always have to think about the mirror image as you take those forms off, what the concrete will look like. So as you can see in this, we have a little bit of the reveal of the plywood that was used in the formworks. So that becomes part of the story of the concrete. The other great thing about concrete is it's very sustainable. It's a great thermal mass material, meaning that it can store energy, it can store heat. And in this house, where we face west and we're surrounded by bedrock, we're in a bedrock bowl here, having the house cool in the summertime is very important to the clients. And so I thought of concrete as a natural air conditioner. So what happens in this house is we can open the big doors open in the summertime, in the early evening when it's cool out, let that cool air rush into the house, then it gets absorbed by the concrete, and then during the day we leave the house closed up in sort of, I call it the closed envelope stage, and the concrete can radiate out that cool. So that's a wonderful, wonderful thing to harness. And then the other beauty of concrete is when the sun hits it. When ultraviolet radiation hits it, it warms up. It's a nice warm material. And then finally, concrete, although it's a very industrial material, at night, as you can see with the lighting, it really comes alive. And it plays off, the roughness of the concrete plays off the finish of the wood and the drywall. So it creates this wonderful contrast of materials. And that's part of sort of the song of this house, the dance of the different materials together, how they come together.
I like you. Yeah, I like the way you said that. It's beautifully put. So James, you are known for your eco-friendly homes on the West Coast. And so what makes this house an eco-friendly house?
Well, you know, there's a great story to that, because when we started this project, we didn't talk about green architecture at all. In fact, I didn't actually start talking about the greenness of this house until I went to publish it. A couple of months after the owners had moved in, because in my mind, you just have to think green anyways. I was trained at the University of Oregon, and that's where sort of the pioneer of the green movement on the West Coast came from. There's some great professors. Quite a few are retired now, but they really started that green movement. So a couple of the features that are very green, I already talked about the idea of this air conditioner, so that's called passive cooling. In what we call environmental controls in architecture is really how you deal with the outside and the inside elements, and how you comfort the occupants of the house. So we wanted to buffer the house from this very intense West Coast, Western exposure sunlight and the heat, as I talked about in the summertime, as it can be quite hot here from May all the way through to September on this particular site. It's a microclimate. So besides the concrete, it's this thermal mass to cool, and in the wintertime it holds the heat. We have very broad overhangs facing the west, so we have this covered porch, which is a wonderful thing because it's also a little bit of an Asian idea of having verandas surrounding like a pagoda. And that brings in the Asian influence with the double posts and the beams that slide in between them. Another thing we do in this house, which I like to do in all my projects, is harvest the rainwater. So the roofs are very simple in this house.
Yeah.
It's two sheds that come together at a right angle. And the far shed from where the rainwater collects is 10 inches taller, which coincidentally is the same height as the main beam structure. And then the lower roof just slides under that. That all drains into an oversized gutter and then falls into an aquatic garden, a little concrete pond. And then that water is captured at one point for use in the garden for irrigation. So that's important. Natural daylight is always important as a green aspect because it means you don't have to have lights on all the time. So we have a lot of windows. We have a clear story window back through here, which is a very unique feature. And the concrete wall is also an art wall. So you can see that the hangings, the owners of this house collect Japanese and Chinese prints. And it's very delicate material, museum quality material that they want protected. So there's no direct sunlight, but the clear story window allows the natural daylight, even on an overcast day like today, to bounce off this high clear story drywall surface and then cascade down, so the house always has that airy and natural daylight feeling to it. So that's very important in terms of the greenness of the building. And then finally, one really important part of green architecture is energy. Conserving energy. That's probably the biggest. A lot of people talk about materials and not having anything that emits any gases, during the construction or when the owners first move in. But when you think about the lifespan of a building, the energy component is so important of conserving energy. So what we did in this house, we have earth sheltering. So the concrete is actually a great insulator because it's got all this earth behind it. So the natural grade comes up to about this height. And there's a crawl space below as well. So we're using the soil to insulate because that has an ambient temperature of about 50 degrees in any time of year. And then the walls on the back of the house, which is north facing, are actually incredibly thick. They're all made out of 2x10s with staggered studs filled with insulation. So we've over-insulated in that aspect. And then of course with window packages, we always use argon-filled double-glazed windows. And in some projects where the client can afford it, we go to triple pane as well to conserve energy. So that's really important.
Yeah.
And then the roof has a heavy insulation component to it as well. And even the wood in the decking of the ceiling is an insulator because wood's a natural insulator. So it's a good choice of materials for a northern climate.
So how do your clients find you? Do you sort of go and seek them or they find you?
Usually it's happenstance. So, it's a happy accident that people come together. This particular client came from my builder who built my house. And it was a referral, and then he ended up building this house. So referral is one way. I like to try to, publicize the green aspects because I think communicating green ideas educates the broader profession and obviously homeowners as well. So this particular house was featured as they call it a whole house article in Fine Home Building, which has got a huge circulation of about 400,000 throughout Canada and the United States. And in fact, there was an online article and a little online slideshow I did for Taunton Press, the publisher of Fine Home Building as well. And then clients can find me through reading these articles because that way I connect with clients that have similar values. And so that's really important. I like to say you have to have good clients to do good architecture. So my goal is to have good clients first of all.
Yeah.
And then the architecture is a natural fit after
Yeah,
that. So that's really important.
Yeah, well, thank you so much.
You're welcome. Thank you.
Thank you.